I had a weird experience. I had a crazy experience this summer where
That's what I hear. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's why we're talking
Yeah.
is I got criticized because I said I found God, and apparently you're not supposed to say that. But
who said you're not supposed to say that?
I don't know. People on the internet.
Yeah, don't pay attention to the YouTube comments.
But I think, so you're talking about, so I think what did it for me was there were too many, I'd like to think of myself as like logical, very logical. So I've tried to put the world I've tried to understand the world through science and facts and kind of devoid of intuition. And I think I learned that from my dad. And it took me a while to build back the intuition side and to actually take that seriously, because I thought, well, if you can't figure it out in your head, then it's not real, which is completely overestimating your ability to figure things out. But I think part of what did it for me this summer was that was this pattern that you're talking about, right? And I kind of tuned into it like you know what's been going on with my family. It's been completely absurd. But there have been things that have happened that are just too weird to explain any other way. Like when mom was sick, it was like being in a movie. Like my entire life has been being in a movie, which you could say is like being in a story. But when my mom got sick, she knew the day she was going to get better. And it was like, well, that's not, you literally can't explain that. Nobody could explain it. None of the doctors could explain it. And it was mom and dad's anniversary. And so everybody in my family was just kind of like, well, put that in the pile of things we just cannot understand at all. So that occurrence has just been like, I've just been thinking about that, just being like, how do I understand that in a logical way? And then when my dad got sick, so he was reacting to the medications he was put on terribly. That was January. I thought, this is going to be awful. I had this weird feeling like this is going to be absolutely awful for 2 years. Right. And I was like, I can run away, because I was considering moving. I was like, this is really difficult. We didn't know what to do. This is really bad. I was like, I could just run away, or it's going to take 2 years and it's just going to be like crippling. And I was like, okay, I can do that. It's just 2 years, right? Out of a lifetime, I can do 2 years. And then it was like spot on, where things were really awful and then everything just fixed themselves. And so those two things happened. And then there were just too many things like that happened that felt like I've been, I don't know, living in a story. And so I don't know if that aligns with anything you've said, because I'm having a difficult time exactly understanding what you mean. But does that make sense at all?
No, it makes sense. I think that most people have these moments, and it's true that it often happens. You can understand that this pattern of reality, it's actually reasonable, but it always points towards something which is a little bit beyond itself, like beyond reason, you could say. So often we have these crazy experiences. We could call them miracles, or we could call them that reveal to us something which is beyond what's going on in everyday life. Like it seems to kind of connect everything together in a way that is very difficult to fully account for at the lower level. And I really believe that this is just how the world works. Like this is really how reality works. Like reality is made with meaning. Like you could say that a good way to understand is that God really does fill up the world. And there are moments where we can have these things just completely come together. And you have a sense that, not only a sense, but it's like your whole being is carried up, let's say, for a moment. And it doesn't always last very long. You know, some people it lasts longer, thank goodness for them. But for most of us, it's like a moment where you feel carried up and you're like, okay, I can't deny that. Like, I can't deny what's happened. And so what was your experience of saying that you found God? How did it, like, so you talked about your mom and everything, but in your life, like, what did that mean? Like, what did that mean in terms of experience?
Well, so that happened with my mom. And then she started practicing Catholicism, right? And I thought that was very strange, because she got really into it really quickly, right? From not being into it at all, kind of. You know, she's always had a little bit, she wanted us to go to church a bit, but it was never really part of our family life. So I was like, okay, mom's part of a cult. And it looked like that from the outside. It did. Even dad was a little, it wasn't just Catholicism, it was some people she was around and we were like, this looks like a cult. But she also she became a lot more empathetic and a lot more patient. And it was noticeable. And so I was talking to her about it and just like, how did you get there? She was like, oh, well, God. Like, okay, I don't understand what that means. And so it's been about a year of me being open to the idea, but not understanding what that meant or what that felt like. And then in August, dad was really sick in August, and it was really scary. And too many bad things were happening at the same time. It was like, if things could go wrong, they were going wrong in every area. And it was like, this is way too much. This is like, this doesn't make sense. There's too much bad luck happening at the same time.
Yeah.
So there was that. I was like navigating a divorce, which was bad, but everything else was so much worse that was not even the bad part of my life. So it's just been brutal for a couple of years. And I went away for like a week when dad was he was a bit stable, but I needed to just have a bit of time. And I went away and I met somebody who was like, how are you doing? And because I had talked a bit about what I was going through, about my parents being sick and like my job and the media and dad and divorce and everything. And he was like, how are you holding up? And I was like, oh, I'm not holding up. Like, I'm not holding up. I'm not depressed, but I'm not holding up. Things are awful, right? Like, I'm crying every day, but it's not depression. It's just things are really bad. And he was like, well, you need God. And I was like, okay, that's great. That sounds fantastic. What do I do? And he said, I don't even know why this happened exactly, but he just said, ask him to reveal himself to you. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. So I went home and was like begged, because I was in rough shape. I got to the point this summer where things were so bad and I couldn't do anything to solve them. And I was like, what do I do now? If I've tried every route, like every way possible to solve some of these problems and there's nothing else I can do, what do I do? And that's when I started praying. So I had to get to that point, and it took a while. But anyway, so I went home and so I was praying, and the next day, like all of the major issues that I had switched directions. So they didn't just go away, but things that I wanted to happen and I could see happening but weren't happening just all happened the same day. And that was it. I was like, okay. So that was wild. And then, well, I've been reading the Bible and just trying to learn what I can. I had some other strange experiences, but that's part of the reason I'm having you on, because this is pretty new. Even though dad is my dad, like he comes through this from a psychological perspective and a meaning perspective. And whatever I'm experiencing now isn't exactly what he's taught me growing up, I think.
Yeah. But it's related in a way. Like it's related in the sense that, I mean, Jordan talks about the idea of going down into the whale, like Pinocchio going down, or the father kind of going down, the death of the father. But you don't necessarily have to understand it exactly in the sense of the death of the father, but you can understand it as a world that is an old world that's crumbling, let's say, or something, that all these things that are kind of crumbling. And then there's a sense in which when that, the idea, you hear this about, let's say, alcoholics, right? It's like you hit rock bottom, right? You've heard that expression, but that doesn't necessarily, it's not something that happens just with addiction. It's something that can happen in many ways. It is that when we descend and things start to break down, it's very painful. But then what happens at the bottom is you get something like an inkling of a new world, or something like a light that appears in the cavern. And you know, and sometimes people are going to, especially scientifically minded people will find this weird, but sometimes the way that you describe it is exactly right, which is that, you know, everything is going wrong. And then all of a sudden they realign.
Yeah.
Things realign, right? The idea of finding meaning, but it's not, finding meaning isn't just a subjective thing. That is, meaning reveals itself to you, like things snap and then it gives you a direction. Now, I mean, obviously this is within August. So obviously it's important to understand that that won't necessarily last, like that experience. You know, it's there to show you what's possible in your life. And then later on, you're going to have a lot of problems and it's going to happen again. Like, it's, even if you found God and let's say you kind of enter on that path where you pray and you kind of try to transform your life. I mean, it doesn't mean that it's all going to be aligned that way all the time. It's more like it's almost like an inkling of what's possible is shown to you. So you can, like a glimmer to say like, oh, okay, this is it. Like, I need to move in this direction. But then there's a lot more pain, you know, along the way, nonetheless.
I actually, so I'm on this like meat diet, right? In 2015, when I went off of my medication and put myself into remission and got better, that was the first time. I didn't associate it with God, but that was the first time when I could feel like I felt for my entire life that I just was the embodiment of bad luck somehow. I was like, why is it that everything I do, I have to do 4 times in order for it to kind of succeed? It was ridiculous. And even my parents commented on it. They're just like, things work out for Julian, but everything you do, whatever could go wrong, goes wrong. And so I just lived my life like that. It was just like, it was awful. I kind of got used to it. You never get used to that. It's still frustrating. And then I got better and I had that shift where it was just like my world flipped upside down and I associated it with health. I was just like, is this what it feels like to be healthy? But it was a really physical feeling of going in the wrong direction and then having things switch and things were just working out. I was on time all the time. Like if I missed an assignment, there'd be a delay. And when it was due, it was things that didn't make sense, right? And so that was the first time I experienced that. And then I went off of my antidepressants. Those were the last things I stopped taking. And I lost that. And then everything was awful again for a number of years. And I just had these it's been confusing because I've been able to I've been able to think about it in a logical way where I've been like, well, this is what happened. And that's why I had those feelings. So like I went off of the SSRIs and I had SSRI withdrawal. And so I was depressed, and not being depressed is when I'm in this like alignment. But then it's just gotten too weird. And I haven't been depressed for so long, but I've still had these feelings of being in alignment or whatever that means, or going in the wrong direction. And so now I'm a Christian.